All right, there are different types of arguments. Carl Rogers put together a type of argument which we refer to as Rogerian. In the Rogerian type of argument, one person is going to be right and the other one is wrong. You attack the person over and over again until you convince them. He recommends that you think of those who disagree with you as colleagues and not adversaries. So what you're going to try to do instead of being opponents is to find a relationship between you and your opponent. This is basically kind of looking at a win-win. We both have good points. And then you'll find on the bottom of page 408, there is a section there on what to look for in a Rogerian argument. And they'll offer the suggestions. Summarize, consider the points of those who disagree with you, and so on. But have a look at that. The other type of argument that we think about is called deductive and then inductive argument. One method is deductive, which means we start from a general premise or assumption, and then then on the other side we have the inductive method. And inductive, we go from a general observation and then come to a more general conclusion. Deductive arguments tend to have a syllogism. Basically what it is a syllogism is we have a major premise, we have a minor premise, and based on those we come out to a conclusion. Olympic runners are fast. Jesse Owens was an Olympic runner, therefore Jesse Owens was fast. If you agree with the major premise and then you agree with the minor premise, then you have to agree to the conclusion. You can have a look in this chapter later on where it talks about the Declaration of Independence, and a deductive argument for the Declaration of Independence, which is the way it was put together, is tyrannical rulers deserve no loyalty. King George III is a tyrannical ruler, therefore King George III deserves no loyalty. And as if you remember the first few words, we declare this to be self-evident. So obvious you don't even have to prove it. Sometimes the conclusion can said to be valid, but other times it may not be logical. So if, for example, we could say all dogs are animals, all cats are animals, therefore all dogs are cats. And of course that's ridiculous, but we have to make sure that we tighten it up. All dogs are animals. Ralph is an animal, therefore Ralph is a dog. And here again we still have a problem with that premise. Even if your syllogism is valid, its conclusion will not necessarily be true. All dogs are brown. My poodle Toby is a dog, therefore Toby is brown. Well, it happens Toby is not brown, he's black. So your conclusion is false because the major premise is false. All dogs are brown. So make sure as you're going through your arguments that the premises follow. When you are using inductive argument, doesn't have the nice fancy form that the deductive has, but you start out with a hypothesis, and then you gather evidence that's relevant, and you hope to find an answer. Move from your evidence to your conclusion by making an inference. How did the living room window get broken? There is a baseball on the living room floor. Baseball was not there earlier. Some children were playing baseball this afternoon. They were playing in the vacant lot across from my window, and then they stopped playing. They aren't there now. Conclusion, one of the children hit or threw the ball through the window, and then they all ran away. It takes all of your evidence into account, and then it comes to a conclusion. Now, if it turned out that the kids were playing volleyball and not baseball, then our conclusion might not be as true. But you look at all possibilities and before you come to your conclusion. Okay, you have to be careful that you're not jumping to a conclusion. And I'm sure if you take and look at some of the arguments that are going on now in the political arena, you can see how quickly people come up with some false conclusions. The next type of argument is called the Toulmin. This came from philosopher Stephen Toulmin, and it tries to describe how the argument strategizes. Toulmin puts forth the model that divides arguments into three parts. You've got a claim, you have the grounds, and then you make a warrant. So the claim is the main point of the essay. Usually the claim is stated directly as the thesis. Then you provide the grounds, you provide claims. And then, that could be facts, or it could be opinions, or something of that nature. And then finally, based on that, you can make your warrant. Carol should be elected class president. Carol is an honor student. A person who is an honor student would make a good class president. So if you've used this following Toulmin logic, you can see you can still use inductive and deductive, but it will just help you look at your arguments. Now, not all arguments are going to work out correctly. There are fallacies, illogical statements. One is begging the question. You make a statement and say that it's true when actually the statement requires proof. It requires the readers to agree to that certain points are self-evident when in fact they are not. Argument in analogy. This is when you take something unfamiliar and compare it to something familiar. Sometimes analogies can explain an abstract, but they do not necessarily prove your point. And so, for example, there may be dissimilarities. Personal attack, the ad hominem. The public should not take seriously Dr. Mason's plan for improving county health services. He's overweight and he's a smoker. Well, that does not mean that Dr. Mason does not have the information that he needs to be good at that planning. But that's attacking the person rather than their information. Jumping to a conclusion, which is also sometimes called a hasty or sweeping generalization. And again, we see a lot of that in the political field. But something to the conclusion of, because our son did well from homeschooling, then every child should be homeschooled. Well, that's not necessarily going to be the case for all of them. Then we have the either or. This fallacy occurs when they suggest that there are only two possibilities, either this or this. If I don't do well this semester, I may as well drop out of school. Not necessarily, obviously, the truth. It may be that you're having a tough semester. Don't oversimplify. Then we have equivocation, where it comes to a conclusion, but the premise actually doesn't. So, for example, as humans, computers are praiseworthy and even remarkable. But how human can we be if we hope to rely on computers to make our decisions? Human is referring to the whole human race. In the second sentence, human means someone who is merciful, but by subtly changing this around, you make an argument that sounds more reasonable than it truly is. A red herring. This actually came from the early days in Russia, when a serf would try to escape, and they would go running off into the woods. Well, they had the big dogs that would chase them, and what they would do is they would take a herring with them, and they'd go a little bit, and then they'd rub herring on the path, and the dogs would come up, take a sniff of the herring, and then they couldn't smell anything else. So it basically, you divert someone's attention by bringing up something else. The you also asserts that your argument has no value because the opponent doesn't follow his or her own advice. How can a judge work in the court when he admitted that in his college days he smoked marijuana? Are the two items fully related or not? Doubtful authorities. Diane Sawyer's a reporter, but we are not necessarily going to believe everything that Diane Sawyer says just because she said it. She's not an expert in all fields. Misleading statistics. According to Mark Twain, he says there are lies, there are damned lies, and then there are statistics. We can make statistics say anything we want them to say. Women will never be competent firefighters. After all, 50% of the women in the city's training program failed the exam. Now, what he didn't mention to you was that there are only two women in the program, then therefore 1 out of 2. Obviously not a large enough sample. And one of my favorites, the post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, therefore because of this. Just because two events occur close together does not necessarily mean that the first thing caused the second. The non sequitur, it doesn't follow. This fallacy occurs when a statement doesn't logically fit. Disarmament weakened the United States after World War I. Well, disarmament also weakened the U.S. after the Vietnam War. So for this reason, the city's efforts to limit gun sales will weaken the United States. Historical facts have nothing to do with the city fact. And then make sure with your arguments that you get those transitions going. There are all sorts of words. Page 416 offers you a good list of possible words for transitions. And I'm not going to spend much time talking about the structuring of the essay because we've already done this with the other types of essays that we've studied so far. But make sure that your information is provided logically and convincingly. And you can read through the Declaration of Independence essay and see how it does follow this form of outline. And you can check every essay that you write will always have your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. Make sure you do not forget to have a good thesis statement, an introduction that sets up your point. And at the end of your first draft, make sure you're on page 418 and you look at the revision checklist there, and then how to edit your essay. Read this on your own.